Hi, everybody. This is Ask Sleep Doctor Anything live stream show by SLEEPON. Today, we're going to chat about anything you want to know about sleep apnea. Before we start, I highly encourage you to read the disclaimer below because this is really not any forms of diagnosis or treatment plan. If you want diagnosis or treatment plans, you have to pay a visit to your doctor. So today we have two guests here. On the top left is Dr. Chang, who is a really reputable sleep medicine doctor and also the president of ISSTA, which stands for International Sleep Science and Technology Association. And at the bottom is Carl Lenore, who's a really knowledgeable man in the health field. And I attach a link of his Superhuman Radio below this video. He is the CEO and host of Superhuman Radio. I highly encourage you to check out his website. So for today's show, it's going around for 40 minutes. For the first 25 minutes, we're going to answer the 10 mostly asked sleep apnea questions we collected from our audience previously. And for the rest of times, we're going to answer some Q&A questions. So feel free to type in comments to the right of this video, and we will draw some questions to answer at the end. So I guess let's get started. So I have 10 questions with me right now, and I want to ask our two guests, like, what are their thoughts about it? Because this question really concerns like many people. So the first question is, why do I have sleep apnea? And I guess what they're asking is actually like, what are the common causes of sleep apnea? So Dr. Chang, what do you think about it?
Okay, usually the sleep apnea are caused by the narrowing of the upper airway, either from the nose or in the throat or in the back of the tongue, or even for the small bony structure will cause the narrowing of the upper airway. So when people fall asleep, the muscle tone tends to be reduced and even to be disappear in some stage of sleep. So under the such circumstances, people tend to have the obstruction of the upper airway during sleep. That's called sleep apnea. So the common cause of the sleep apnea is the narrowing of the upper airway.
And normally there are like two types of sleep apnea, as I know. Like what do you think? Like what are the common causes like of two of them, like respectively? So you mentioned obstructive sleep apnea, which is caused by the blockage of the airway. And for another type, also known as the central sleep apnea, like what do you think are the common causes for that?
Okay, as for the central sleep apnea, the prevalence is much less, especially in adult. More central sleep apnea occur in children because the respiratory center in the brain is not mature enough. So more central sleep apnea occur in the children. But as for adult, it's very few cases occur. But sometimes we'll see the central sleep apnea in the sleep lab among the adult group. And the cause of the central sleep apnea are because the respiratory center in the brain doesn't work appropriately, meaning in the usual time, the respiratory center needs to release the signal, meaning to fire for the following neurons or nerve cell to be able to work and to transmit the signal to the respiratory muscles so that people can keep on breathing. But in the central sleep apnea, the brain does not send off the signal. So the respiratory muscle doesn't know when or how to move. So it caused sleep apnea.
And what are your thoughts, Carl?
About central sleep apnea or sleep apnea in general?
Like anything you want to talk about?
Well, I agree with the doctor. Central sleep apnea doesn't occur in adults typically. It is a refractory process of a balance of serotonin and dopamine that triggers this. In fact, the central sleep apnea is closely tied to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, where a baby is laying on their stomach and they stop breathing and they don't get the impulse to breathe, and it doesn't happen in adults as much. In adults, we do see a lot more obstructive sleep apnea, but one of the things that I'm starting to see a lot of, and have been for about the past 10 years, is the correlation between gut issues and obstructive sleep apnea. It was once thought that obesity, a thick neck girth, was the cause of obstructive sleep apnea, because the more fat, and even in bodybuilders, the muscle you put on around your neck, it seems to collapse the upper airway. But what we're seeing now is very, very lean people, very skinny people. And the earliest signs are really bad snoring. I tell people on my show all the time, if you snore, that's not normal. People think it's funny, but snoring should be taken very seriously as the beginning of something that could go wrong. Snoring can actually damage the upper esophageal sphincter and cause it to depressurize and start to pull things out of the gut, which then causes a violent cycle. A lot of people who suffer from obstructive sleep apnea will tell you that, oh, I ate something last night, I had heartburn, and I snored terribly, and my wife said I was stopped breathing. The stuff that comes up from the stomach makes it worse, because it causes inflammation in the upper airway, and it causes the palate and the soft tissue in the back of the mouth to collapse. And also, gut issues are tied to obstructive sleep apnea, in my humble opinion, through something that Western medicine is still ignoring, this whole leaky gut thing that people think is mysterious and not real. But when the mucosal barrier of the stomach breaks down and food can actually start to permeate the lining of the stomach, the vagal nerve is right up, it's attached to the gut. And as the vagus nerve becomes inflamed from things that are actually seeping out of the stomach into it, it dysregulates a lot of things, heart rate. We see a lot of arrhythmia problems in the population today, but it also can cause that impulse that the doctor was talking about that makes people breathe. And it also collapses the tone. The tone to the muscles in the back of the throat are lost, and it collapses. So I'm seeing a lot of people who have obstructive sleep apnea also say, oh, I have terrible digestive problems. I get bloated all the time. They have distended stomachs. This is evidence of a complete inflammatory process taking place, and it's going north into the throat.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great explanation.
Very true.
So for like according to like what both of you mentioned, that obstructive sleep apnea seems to be more common ones than central sleep apnea. So I want to focus more on obstructive sleep apnea. So the blockage of the airways, like other than the causes both of you mentioned, is there like any causes that might due to like my inheritance from the parents, that's like the airway structures, it's just like malfunctions, and any other causes that's possible to cause the blockage?
Yeah, there are a common phenomenon is caused from the allergic rhinitis, meaning the nasal allergy. Many parents know that sometimes their children get the raccoon eye, meaning the blacken out of the skin around the eyes because of the nasal allergy. But most of them, they ignore what happened during sleep when their children have severely nasal allergy, including the blockage of the nose. So the raccoon eye, the breaking out of the eye ring, is majorly caused by the oxygen level decrease during sleep, meaning that's caused by obstructive sleep apnea. So if people don't pay attention to what happened during sleep, they will just think the nasal allergy will cause the broken eye, but it is not. It is not so directly, because many things have some mechanism happen during the sleep.
Mm.
Another thing we're seeing from an evolutionary perspective is a narrowing of the jaw. There's a lot of forensic work being done. If we look back to like Australopithecus, big wide jaws, big wide teeth for crushing, twigs and roots. As we've refined our diets and we don't chew as much, we see there's a narrowing of the jaw. I did a show probably 6 or 7 years ago about the link between adolescent obstructive sleep apnea and ADHD. And some of these children actually undergo a dramatic reconstruction of the jaw and the roof of the mouth to make it wider. The sleep apnea goes away and the ADHD goes away as well. But there's a consensus among some very, very forward-leaning orthodontists today telling people that foods that are hard to chew at a young age are critical for children to create big, wide, strong jaws while the sutures in the upper roof of the mouth are still pliable and the jaw can still continue to form. And eating soft foods, they contend, is contributing to a narrowing of the jaw that's causing a narrowing of the airway.
Mm-hmm. And also, like I've read in a book that it says if you are a mouth breather, you use your mouth to breathe often, it's going to narrow your jaw too.
Yes.
It's going to reshape the structure of your mouth, and it can possibly cause obstructive sleep apnea too.
Yes.
It's really.
Yeah. There was a very famous experiment on the monkey, on the rhesus monkey in India. The researcher, they block the nasal passage of the monkey, the baby monkey, after birth. And for about half a year, the upper jaw tends to be retruded, meaning that the whole structure tends to be narrowing after the blockage of the nasal passage. So it also happened in the human baby. So the nasal allergy should be treated appropriately to prevent the following narrowing of the upper airway into the adulthood.
Okay, I guess there is so many causes that it's possible to cause obstructive sleep apnea. So I guess for diagnosis, we're going to talk about, there's a questions regarding to diagnosis later. So you really need to visit your doctor to make sure what are the true causes. So let's move on to our next question. What are the major remedies for sleep apnea? So Carl, you want to start first this time?
Well, I actually think the doctor should start because he dwells in the world of what is current right now. So.
Okay, sure.
Okay, there are several different options for the treatment of obstructive sleep apnea syndrome, but some of them are not one for all. For example, the oral appliance, it can pull forward of the tongue base and also the lower jaw, but it cannot deal with the narrowing of the throat, meaning the oropharynx or the nasal obstruction. So right now here in this program, we like to mention there are two, and the only two universal treatment for the obstructive sleep apnea, meaning this two treatment is good for any site of obstruction of upper airway leading to the sleep apnea syndrome. The first one is the CPAP machine, meaning this continuous positive airway pressure machine, which can produce the positive airway to overcome the obstruction of the upper airway during sleep. And the second one is the sleep surgery, not the ENT surgery, of course, because the ENT surgery always focus on nose and throat, because my background is the ENT surgeon. So I know the whole training program, it doesn't cover about sleep surgery. It just covers partially of this sleep surgery of the upper airway. So the surgical treatment for sleep apnea syndrome will be the upper airway reconstruction. including any site of obstruction, we can deal with. We can open it up utilizing the sleep surgical procedures.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that's really like I'm really curious about is like whether sleep apnea is curable. Like let's just talk about obstructive sleep apnea. So if just by using a CPAP, it's not, in some cases, it's not going to solve the problems of your malfunctioning of your airway and the structures of your mouth or your breathing system, right? Like,
And I would submit that if you're using a traditional CPAP with a full face mask and you're sleeping with your mouth open and your CPAP is pressurizing an open mouth, that you are going to contribute to the inflammation in the upper airway that is actually causing the problem. In my humble opinion, and I'm not a physician, the best way to use a CPAP is to tape the mouth and use a one that fits in the nose and pressurizes the airway that way, so that you're breathing through the nose all night long and you're not sucking anything that's leaking out of the stomach up into the airway. People who their mouth opens and they're breathing with the mask on through their mouth, this is a bad idea for the reasons that we just talked about, that mouth breathing is not good. So mouth breathing 8 hours a night is not good either. I really think that people, and the other thing I've learned from working with some people is you can use less pressure when you seal the mouth with tape. You could use regular surgical tape. You have to shave. And you pressurize the nose, you can generally get away with between 6 and 8 milligrams of water, the way they measure pressure in a CPAP, where these other people with their mouths open and the full mask, they're going up to 18, 19. And this is a failed idea. It's not a good idea.
So
yeah, there are evidence. I can make some comment for
Please.
Carl's opinion. Yeah, that's very true. There has been some journal paper publication discussing about the compliance of CPAP machine from the pulmonologist, meaning the chest medicine doctor, and also from the ENT doctor. The compliance rate will be higher from the prescription of CPAP from the ENT doctor, because most of the ENT doctor will see the passage of the nose. When the nasal passage is narrowing or the resistance are increased, the CPAP currents will be largely reduced, and the people will feel very uncomfortable when wearing the CPAP machine with the nasal obstruction. So Carl mentioned a very important point is that the nasal passage will be very critical for the successful usage of the CPAP machine. So the total concept is that we need to control the nasal allergy or even correct the narrowing structure of the nasal passage, so that the CPAP machine could be successfully and comfortably used during sleep.
I'd like to submit something also to come back. I've been watching the population develop obstructive sleep apnea over the past 14 years, and it's fascinated me. In fact, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino from the University of Southern Florida, that was his primary area of research before he started doing ketones and cancer. And he and I have had discussions about this. And the reality is that when we look at some interesting phenomenon in the population, dry eye, what we think you perceive as nose allergies, and gut problems, we realize what's happening is that the contents of the stomach is getting up, very acidic, very caustic, digested foods and chyme, they call it, vaporizing up into the upper airways, causing dry eye, causing the nasal passages to become inflamed and plugged, and people think, oh, this is just allergies. All of these people have a common thing. They have gut problems. And I would submit, and I say this unabashedly, and I hope that more ENTs and sleep medicine physicians start to pay attention to this. If you fix these people's gut problems, they stop snoring, their dry eye goes away, their tinnitus goes away, because all of this inflammation, that the longer they live with this inflammation, it permeates the tissue right into the skull. And the longer they live with this inflammation, the worse they feel. And when you get their stomachs fixed, when you get their diet straightened out, when you find out the foods, you reestablish the mucosal barrier by supplementing with high doses of glutamine, and you get these people's stomachs fixed, the narrowing of the airway goes away, their dry eye goes away, their tinnitus goes away, their stuffy nose goes away, and oh my God, I can breathe again. And we really not to, if you really want, as you're asking, Nicole, like, how do we go to the root of the problem? We have to look at these people with, AARP did a study. 76% of Americans surveyed said they had digestive issues. And we have Nexium and all these PPIs, they're popular products. Everybody takes something because this food makes them. No, don't eat that food anymore. Don't take a pill. Don't eat that food. If we start looking at the gut problems, we will not only unlock obstructive sleep apnea, but lots of autoimmune disorders as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's really true, because that's what happened to my dad. It's like, it's been like so long that it's like a vicious cycle. It's just like the breathing problems affects the guts, and the gut problems affects like the breathing systems. And it's just like a vicious cycle that's like going to deteriorate like for so long. So I guess that's a really great point. And later on, we're going to discuss about like what are a correct diets. So so let's jump to the questions. What are a correct diets, or what kind of foods we should avoid, like to improve our sleep apnea? Or like what kind of drugs? It's like, what kind of drug? Because I know that some people have insomnia at the same time. So that's they're like eating some, prescribing to some insomnia drugs, which might actually in fact
make it worse.
Make their sleep apnea syndrome worse. So,
right.
Yeah, Dr. Chang, what do you think?
Yeah, of course, the medication for insomnia, usually they will relax the upper airway muscle, so it will cause more collapse of upper airway during sleep. Just like the drunken people, they will have this louder snoring. It's the same mechanism. So if the physician didn't pay attention to the real mechanism, or the pathophysiology of this sleep problem, and they prescribe the sleeping pill for the poor sleeper, then it might worsen the sleep apnea syndrome. So every prescription of the sleeping pill need to only after the appropriate sleep study. That's what the golden rule in the sleep medicine field.
So my opinion of this is this is a very complex discussion. There is no appropriate human diet at this point in time that we can point at. We can use some of our evolutionary edicts to say what doesn't belong in a diet. I think we've come to that conclusion now. I think that an elimination diet is, if somebody has severe gut issues, an elimination diet is the first thing that they need to do. So they know what foods bother them. They'll tell you, oh, when I eat pizza, I get bloated. Okay, stop eating pizza. And the reality is, what we find that when people do an elimination diet, the foods that seem to cause the greatest inflammatory response in the gut, because they feed bad microbes. And keep in mind that your microbe, if you're not sleeping well, during sleep is when the gut prunes and cleans up and does all, because it's not hosting food. It doesn't have to digest food. So now it can clean house. And so if you're not sleeping well, your microbial diversity in your gut is going to shift to not a good microbial diversity. Those bad microbes cause cravings because they want to be fed. So they create chemicals that tell the brain, drink more alcohol, eat more bread, eat more pasta, eat more popcorn. But what we see very conclusively in lots of research, this type of research is called metabolomics, where they actually look at the effects of foods in the body after they're digested. We know that there are pro-inflammatory foods that people love, and these are grains, corn, soy. Rice is fine, especially white rice, because the anti-nutrients are in the husk that protect the rice from being eaten. So white rice, they take the husk off. White rice is actually one of the only grains that I think people should eat if they want starchy carbs. But things that are turned into flour are called acellular carbohydrates. And acellular carbohydrates digest in the gut very quickly, and they're consumed by bad microbes, the kind of microbes that lead to digestive issues. And these microbes are protective. They turn off the proton pumps to make the environment less acidic so that they can start to inhabit the small intestine. And we hear all about SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So the reality is, the diet that I recommend to people is either the Mediterranean or the paleo diet. Eat whichever one you like. You know, not a lot of red meat, lots of fish, lots of chicken, and lots of green leafy vegetables, of course, organic, because you don't want to consume chemicals. We still aren't clear on what those are doing to people. When people eat like that for a week or two, they go, man, my stomach feels so good. But then it's Friday night. Everybody's having pizza. Let me have a piece of pizza. Boom, they're back to where they started out. So the reality is that paying attention to your body, not taking a pill because, that guy has that commercial, when the food you love doesn't love you, take Nexium. No, when the food you love doesn't love you, don't eat it. Don't eat the chili dog if it makes you sick. That's just stupid. I mean, but pay attention to what works for you and what doesn't, and start to eliminate the things that don't work. And what people find out is the Mediterranean diet or the paleo diet seems to really allow people's stomachs to get better. And then you have to be patient, because it literally took 10 years for you to break down the mucosal barrier and the cilia in your gut that is causing all the problems. You can't fix this in 3 weeks. You have to start eating right, and you have to eat right for the rest of your life. And over time, you'll get better and better and better. And all of a sudden, one day, your wife will say, you don't snore anymore. Because if you're snoring, that's the canary in the mine. Snoring is not natural. It's not normal. That's my opinion, my uneducated opinion.
Yeah, very kind. But I'd like to mention the last point, because the time is very, very limited. I would like to remind the audience that do not eat too much 3 hours before you go to bed, because when your brain is going to sleep, going to rest, your stomach, your intestine needs to go to sleep also. So if you eat too much before going to bed within 3 hours, then your stomach and your intestine need to keep working rather than to get some rest. So it will cause some incomparable rest and working period. So that will cause some disease in the long run.
In fact, what Dr. Chang just said is one of the parts. Dr. Dale Bredesen, who at UCLA is reversing the symptoms of Alzheimer's. He can't say he's reversing Alzheimer's because we're not biopsying people's brains, but he's reversing the symptoms of Alzheimer's. And one of his prescriptions is 3 hours before bedtime, stop eating. So this is and keep in mind, this plays into evolution, right? Throughout evolution, we probably had anywhere from a 12 to 18-hour fast, because it got dark. We went in our cave. Maybe we had some nuts or berries, but we weren't eating. And then we slept, and then we woke up in the morning, and then we had to go look for food. It wasn't in the refrigerator. And so when we start to look at the evolutionary edicts that our body has evolved under for millions of years versus the last 40,000 years, we realize that eating right before bed is a horrible idea for sleep. Horrible.
Like anything, any food.
Anything.
Stop it. Okay.
Anything. And I observe, I eat my last meal at 6 p.m. and then I don't eat again until after I train in the morning from the gym. I haven't had my meal yet, but I will have it shortly. So I generally incorporate a 16-hour fast every single day.
So does that tie into the intermittent fasting that people mentions? Actually, intermittent fastings can help sleep.
Yes, it can help sleep, but I don't like the term intermittent fasting because it creates this zealot idea. I like a more evolutionary meal timing pattern, more like we would have had before we had refrigerators and round-the-clock food access.
So it's actually really like a chain effect, like your body that is like a chain effect. That's like people want to treat sleep apnea, they want to cure sleep apnea, but they're like keeping a really bad diet habits or like a sleeping habits. That's actually in terms it worsens the sleep apnea, like no matter how they treat it. So
I bet the good doctor could tell you about patient compliance and his frustration, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that resonates with Dr. Chang a lot. So we do have to move on to our next questions. So there are people, there are audience asking, what are the correlations between sleep apnea and hypertension? So Dr. Chang, you want to start first? Share some thoughts.
Sure. There has been over 100 of the publication on the academic journal papers in the world have proved that over 80% of the hypertension are directly caused by sleep apnea. Because the sleep apnea will reduce the oxygen level in the blood and also in the whole body, including in the heart. So it will cause a heart burden. And if the heart burden occur every night, it will induce the sympathetic tone. And the sympathetic tone increasing gradually will cause the hypertension in the long run. So why the hypertension can never be cured? Because the same reason, most of the physician, they doesn't pay attention. They don't pay attention to what happened during sleep of their patient. They just see the surface, the blood pressure going higher and higher. They just prescribe the medicine to depress the high blood pressure, but they just ignore what happened during sleep.
So that means like the people who have hypertension, they should really like pay attention to their sleep, maybe monitor their sleep to see whether whether their sleeps are causing their hypertension. Okay.
Yes. In the August of 2017, the ISSTA, the International Sleep Science and Technology Association, which right now I am serving the global president in Berlin, Germany, we proposed the APEC sleep technology agenda, the Asia Pacific Economic Corporate, and this agenda include the so many research publication I mentioned just now to raise the awareness about the importance of sleep and the relationship with the poor sleep and so many different kind of chronic diseases, not only the hypertension, but also the heart disease like a coronary artery disease, or even the diabetes and stroke, and also the sexual dysfunction. There has been so many publications about this. So sleep is the first beginning to keep people healthy and to make their better quality of life.
And correcting sleep will reverse diseases. As the doctor is pointing out, poor sleep correlates with just about everything out there. Insulin resistance occurs in just 2 nights of poor sleep. They did this study on Olympic athletes. Another study was done on interns who have to work long shifts, 2-3 day shifts. Insulin sensitivity becomes compromised quickly. When insulin sensitivity becomes compromised, angiotensin converting enzyme goes through the roof. When angiotensin converting enzyme goes through the roof, all of the peripheral blood vessels constrict. When this happens, core pressure goes up. And so literally your blood pressure can go up after just 2 nights of poor sleep and be dangerously high.
Right.
Cancers, there's so many cancers that correlate with shift work. I often wonder, when people take third shift jobs because that's all they have available to them, do they realize that they're literally going to compromise their health? So many cancers correlate with people who work third shift, more damaging than tobacco. So, you know,
Right. Yeah.
we have forgotten, don't want to pay attention to how important sleep is. We feel that sleep is wasting time when sleep is actually supporting your life and longevity and your health.
Mm-hmm. So we
Yeah.
do have another topic.
There has been,
yeah. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. There has been so many research on the relationship with shift worker and cancers, and because of the reputation of time again, if the audience are interested about this, you can go to the ISSTA website, official website, www.issta.sleep.org, and you can find out the whole agenda, the content of the APAC sleep technology agenda. You can find out many evidence on this.
Mm-hmm. So we do have another topic like for our next live stream that's we're going to talk about how to counterbalance like the sleep quality, like for shift workers. So I think that's a really big and important topics that we will have like a whole live stream to focus on. So let's move on to our next ones. It's like, what are the correlations between sleep apneas and other diseases? So not only hypertension, so what are the other diseases that can be caused by sleep apnea?
That's a Dr. Chang question.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Chang, you want to start
what
first?
You mean? Yeah. What other cause for the sleep apnea?
What are the diseases can be caused by sleep apnea other than hypertension?
Okay. Yeah, I just mentioned so many chronic diseases, including the heart disease, such as the coronary artery syndrome, and diabetes, stroke, and also sexual dysfunction. And the other problem could be the behavior, like daytime sleepiness, which can lead to the traffic accident and or the poor school performance for the students. So there are tons of evidence to be explored, but there are the evidence everywhere.
Here's two that people don't think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you disrupt sleep architecture because you don't sleep well, and if you have obstructive sleep apnea and it's untreated, so you are coming in and out of sleep all night long, AHIs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know that memory consolidation happens when sleep architecture is appropriate, REM sleep and deep sleep. Well, dementia, non-Alzheimer's related dementia, can actually be one of the early onset identifiers. People think, I just can't remember anything. I keep losing my keys. I can't remember where I parked my car when I went to the grocery store. If you're not sleeping well, your hard drive isn't being defragged every single night, and memories aren't being put where they need to be. And so you can't find that memory when you're trying to remember, where did I go yesterday? What did I have for breakfast yesterday? So that's one thing. Another thing is depression and anxiety. People who don't sleep well tend to become very, very depressed. They don't understand why. I don't understand why I'm so depressed. Well, you're really not sleeping when you think you're sleeping. And quite frankly, to come full circle to something that was talked about earlier on in the show, but lots of these pharmaceutical drugs that are used to sleep, you're still not sleeping. When they observe these individuals with encephalographs and so on, they realize that they don't have normal sleep architecture. And the analogy I use on the show is, if I hit you in the head with a baseball bat, you may lay down for 8 hours with your eyes closed, but you didn't sleep. You're not going to get up from the floor and go, wow, I feel great. And so some of these drugs, while they make you lay still for 8 to 10 hours, they abandon sleep architecture. These people have the same memory and depression issues. And the only way to fix this problem is to fix the problem and not take things that just mask it. But yeah, I mean, depression, anxiety, and you start seeing glitches in your memory, it could be from your sleep.
Mhm. And also like hypertension
Yes,
that
of
caused
course.
by sleep apnea can also cause like heart diseases, like and many other diseases.
Dr. Chang, you were going to jump in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are also evidences about the memory consolidation occurred majorly during the REM sleep.
Mhm.
REM sleep is the sleep stage which people can dream. And when people dreaming, they tend to rehearse what happened during the daytime. Not
Mhm.
necessarily to be the same day, but could be 1 week ago, maybe 1 month ago, maybe 6 months ago. So the REM sleep is the kind of the process that the people can rehearse the uh, what happening in the past in the daytime. So the memory consolidation will make the short-term memory into the long-term memory. So memory is closely related to sleep, and we can say memory is consolidated during sleep, certain sleep
Well, and
stages.
I want to take that one step further. So I did a show about 5 years ago that showed that people who have frequently disrupted sleep, which obstructive sleep apnea will cause,
Mm-hmm.
the proteins that are messages, cellular messages, become misfolded, and they become like metabolic debris, and they actually contribute to plaque. These proteins that are formed at night while you're sleeping that should be concise, easy to understand messages from cell to cell, they become broken, or the wrong amino acids are strung together. And they're now starting to say the overabundance of beta amyloid could be caused because of fragmented sleep, which could lead to Alzheimer's disease. So what Dr. Chang is talking about right now in the relationship between memory and sleep goes just beyond the memory consolidation and could actually have some metabolic changes in the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for SLEEPON, we're also doing research with universities to find out the correlations between different diseases and sleep apnea. And Alzheimer's is one of them. I think there's some really, there must be something that we need to dig into. And sleep apnea definitely needs early interventions. Yeah, Dr. Chen, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, of course. There are more and more research about the relationship between sleep apnea and Alzheimer's diseases. The most recent research are about the respiratory movement will maintain or increase the flow of the cerebrospinal fluid, meaning the fluid inside your brain and spinal cord, surrounding your the people's spinal cord. And in the sleep apnea syndrome patient, the respiratory movement tends to be decreased. So the CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, we call the CSF flow also tend to be reduced. So the ability to remove the tau protein, the toxin, including the tau protein or amyloid protein, that will cannot get the remove rate could be reduced. So they will cause more damage to the brain cell. So this is the most recent research. And the oxygen level decrease itself will have the damage of the neuron that has been widely researched.
Okay. Because our time is limited, so I guess we have to move faster for the later on questions. And let's jump into our next ones. So we already talked about the diets and eating habits. So we'll skip to why would I snore? Does snoring mean sleep apnea for sure? So Carl mentions a bit about snoring. So if you're snoring, you definitely there's some problems you should look into. So do you think So Carl, do you think that's like if someone's is like snoring at night, like are they having sleep apnea? Does that mean?
Snoring is just a symptom, like a coughing. The cough could be caused by the common cold, by the flu, or it could be caused by lung cancer. So snoring can be normal, could be harmless, but also could be the symptom of sleep apnea syndrome. The cause of the snoring is the narrowing of the upper airway, just like I mentioned it at the beginning of this program. So every snoring should be carefully inspected, or even to be examined to see if it is harmful or it is just a simple snoring. But the other research performed by our team, which has been getting the investigator award by American Academy of Sleep Medicine in 2010. This research was on the snoring could cause the vibration trauma of the nerve inside the throat. So even though the snoring is harmless without any sleep apnea, but the long-term vibration trauma in the throat will make the nerve ending of the throat to be damaged. So it will also cause the impair the reflex of the to overcome the sleep apnea.
So snoring doesn't really mean like necessarily means sleep apnea, but there's definitely a close relationships between that. Carl, you want to add on to that?
No, that was good. I mean, I feel that snoring is a warning sign.
Okay.
I don't think it's normal and natural to snore. I mean, the occasional, grumbling, that's one thing, but people who snore, this is a warning sign that something is changing in that anatomy, and it should be paid attention to.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, our next question is like, how do I know if I have sleep apnea? So I guess like that's the diagnosis part. So how can I know that I have sleep apnea? What are the common ways that I can diagnose that?
Okay, people can know from several ways. The first one is from their symptom. For example, if he snore during sleep, and also he feels sleepiness or easy fatigue during the daytime, or a poor performance in the workplace, then the incidence of the sleep apnea will be very high. And the second phenomenon will be the related to chronic diseases. If a person, he has hypertension, or he has hyperlipidemia, or even heart disease, then I think he need to be inspected about the quality of sleep, especially for the sleep apnea syndrome.
So it's like
and
a
the third one,
self-check. Okay.
Yes. And the third method will be to have some screening by utilizing some consumer electronics. There are many wearable devices which can be utilized to have some screening for the sleep apnea syndrome. And the gold standard are always the sleep study. So people need to have the go to the sleep lab or have this home sleep test at home. So that will be the can establish the final diagnosis for the sleep apnea syndrome.
So for people asking like if they want to know like which kinds of sleep apnea they have, like they want to know whether it's like obstructive or central. So for that, do we have to do a sleep study to find out, or like the home? Okay, so for that, if you want to know like which type of sleep apnea you have, you do have to do a sleep study.
But Dr. Chang, if you have central sleep apnea, you may not be snoring. You just will hold your breath at night.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So if someone has central sleep apnea, right? If someone has central sleep apnea, and they have symptoms of sleep apnea, but their wife or husband is saying, but you don't snore. It could be central sleep apnea then, because they're literally holding their breath at night.
Of course, yeah.
So that's like,
so this situation need to be confirmed in the sleep lab.
so snoring doesn't necessarily mean sleep apnea, and sleep apnea doesn't necessarily mean you will snore.
You will snore, right?
Okay, so
That's why it's good to get the go to sleep ring.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Move on to our next questions is, so someone did ask, how do I know which type of sleep apnea do I have? So I guess we answered that questions too. That's the golden standards, do a sleep study. So we have 2 questions left. One is like, what positions should I use to sleep? Is there a best positions to sleep in for people who have sleep apnea? So
I think that it should be individualized.
Okay.
Yeah, because different people have different habits. The best position is to make people relax and fall asleep. That will be the best position. But 2 years ago, there was the publication from the American Gastrointestinal Association, AGA. They investigated on the position of sleep and the relationship with the esophageal cancer. So in this study, they recommend the sleeper should lean on the left side, rather on the right side, because the stomach are on the left side of the body. So when people sleep on their right side, the stomach tend to be in the upper position, and the gastric juice tend to be reflux into the esophagus. And the gastric juice is the strong acid. The pH value are around 2. So it's a very strong acid. So when the gastric acid repeatedly regurgitated into the esophagus, then the esophageal cancer could be more easily produced.
And I would concur with that. Sleep on your left side if you sleep on your back, you're more prone for the soft tissue in the back of the throat when it relaxes to collapse the airway. If you sleep on your left side, as the doctor points out, the esophagus comes up from the left and then goes this way. So you have this high point here. So if you're sleeping on your left, the stuff in your stomach has to climb up in order to get up here. If you're sleeping on your right, it's actually just going to pour down into it. And so sleeping on your left for people who have gut issues and obstructive sleep apnea seems to work the best for them. The other sign that things are going wrong is a phenomenon called Barrett's syndrome. You start noticing that it's when you can swallow, but when it gets down here, it feels like it gets stuck for a second, and you have to grab some water and drink it and push things down. When this starts happening, what's happening is the area right above the esophageal sphincter, the tissue is becoming less pliable and more rigid because it's being exposed to these caustic gastric juices that the doctor is talking about. And this tends to be a problem. So sleeping on the left seems to be the best for people with gut issues and or obstructive sleep apnea.
So many people sleep in a spine position. So that's like you sleeping flat on the bed. It might cause your obstructive sleep apnea to go worse. So okay. And so sleep positions do matter. So okay, our last question is like, any bad habits I should avoid if I have sleep apnea? Should I quit smoking? So
quit smoking anyway, even if you don't have obstructive sleep apnea.
That's a really true answer. So I guess like I guess they're asking what are the bad habits. I guess that's a really broad question because like it might be tied into
I think that Yeah, the number one bad habit for sleep apnea is drinking before going to bed. But it
Drinking.
happens so often. Yeah, because the alcohol tends to relax the upper airway muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So the effect will be just like the, having the sleeping pill to relax your upper airway muscle. And it will make the upper airway prone to collapse.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the number one bad habit for sleep
Mm-hmm.
apnea syndrome.
And then number two would be eating too close to bedtime, because not only does that disrupt sleep architecture, but you're more prone to have gastric juices come back up in the airway. Because remember, when people snore, there's a change in the airway pressure above the esophageal sphincter.
Mhm.
So they're more likely to actually start
Yep.
sucking food and stuff out of their
Mhm.
stomach with the snoring, because the airway is clogged. The lungs want air.
Mhm.
They're pulling. So the pressure in the top and the bottom of the tube increases. And the thing that'll end up giving
Mhm.
up is the esophageal sphincter, and stuff starts coming up, which exacerbates it. So I would say alcohol and food right before bed are two things that you should not do if you have obstructive sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm. And in general, exercising before bed is bad too.
Yeah, because because you're not going to sleep well then. Exercise
Okay.
first thing in the morning. Let's get that out of the way first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm. And a hot bath, like, do you guys recommend a hot bath? Like, will it like affect people's sleep quality?
I find some people say it's great and some people say it stinks. That's one of those things that you have to try. See, a hot bath before bed does nothing good for me. In fact, I don't sleep as well. And I track my sleep with 3 different devices. So I really dissect my sleep. Um, your body temperature is supposed to go down at night. And taking a hot bath before bed is supposed to make the temperature of your body go down relatively. So theoretically, if your body is 98.6 and you get in a bath and it goes up to 99 and then it goes back down to 98.6, that's supposed to create a desire to sleep. It's supposed to cause sleep pressure. It doesn't do that for me. My body temperature goes down to about minus 0.7 to minus 1 degree every night when I sleep well. That just heats me up and makes my body harder to get down into that temperature. So some people that does well for, some people it doesn't. Some people can't fall asleep, put an ice bag on your forehead. This really works. It slows down brain activity. People who say, I can't fall asleep because my mind is racing before bed, get a bag of ice, put a towel over it so it doesn't, hurt your skin. Hold it on your forehead for about 15, 20 minutes. All of a sudden, you'll find your desire to fall asleep kicks right in.
Mm-hmm.
There's all different things, but body temperature is important. Sleeping in a cool room works the best. People who sleep in warm rooms never, ever sleep well. Never.
Mm-hmm. Great. So that's actually not the question for sleep apnea, but that's definitely for our next live stream. That's what we're going to talk about. So we will talk about how to, like, for people who can't fall asleep, like, what are some tips for them? So that's our next live stream. And for today, I guess we will not have a Q&A sections. So I guess that's it. And I want to really have a big thank to both Dr. Chang and Carl and Bethany. I attached the link of both ISSTA and Carl's online radio, the Superhuman Radio. So definitely check it out below this live stream. And I just want to announce that we are starting a series of 10 Ask Sleep Doctor Anything, which will cover topics such as how to counterbalance sleep and work schedule for shift workers, benefits and side effects of insomnia drugs. That's a really big problems as people are asking. Sleeping tips during pregnancy and how to improve sleep for schooling children. The list just goes on with focuses on different sleep disorders and sleep health for different population groups. So subscribe our channel or follow us on social media to gain more information. I attach links below too. So I guess I will see you guys in a while. And also big thanks to both of you for joining us today. And have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye.
You
And
too. Thank
eat
you.
breakfast,
Goodbye.
Carl.
Yeah, I have to
Yeah,
go eat now.
It's
All right.
breakfast time. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Goodbye.